evening, everyone. This is Mehraj Dubey, and I'm wishing you all a very, very good health this season. I hope you're taking good care of yourself during the lockdown and taking good care of your business as well. We are right now in a webinar, Speak-In webinar, and which is Speak-In is in, Asia's biggest network of finest speakers from around the world. Two of those best speakers are with us right now. In another 40 minutes or so, we'll be talking about brave new world of startups. Startups, when we'll be talking about where is the silver lining in the funding, in the product areas or customers, and much more. So let me first introduce two speakers with us, two of our guests. Jaideep Mehta, CEO of Mosaic Media Ventures, and his brands like VC Circle, Tech Circle, Sales Edge need no introduction. He is the most credible and sought after voice in the venture capital world right now. Vineet Ansali is also with us. Vineet, welcoming you as well. Vice President of Orias. I just learned to pronounce his company's name, Orias, which is after a Greek word. Orias Ventures Partners, which is very, very active seed stage investor fund in consumer startups. And his profile, interestingly, on LinkedIn reads very interesting line. He says 3x founder and 2x exits. So what does that mean in this season? We're going to ask him very soon. But both of you, gentlemen, are, for me, angels. Angels are needed in times of crisis. And we're going to talk about angel investments and, of course, so many issues right now surrounding the startup world. Jaideep, my first question is to you. Who should be more worried right now? Someone who is invested in a startup already before the lockdown began, or someone who had a plan or a commitment from an investor and now the things are going to change?
Yeah, see, you know, as someone who's more an investor, I'm tempted to say the first, but I'll tell you this, that for any, I have endless admiration for entrepreneurs, especially in our dear country. Where the new challenge, a new curveball is thrown at them every day. And you see, as an investor, you know, you can diversify your risk with 20 entrepreneurs or 20 founders, right? But if you're an entrepreneur, you've only got one risk, and that's you. It's your venture, your baby. So the life they live is just completely at the edge of the funnel of uncertainty. And I've seen so many great founders, had the pleasure of interacting with many over the years. And the way they think and the way they take risks and the way they just keep fighting is incredible. So people who've raised money before the COVID crisis hit, for them now it's going to be a competitive advantage because their competitors who haven't raised the money are now facing a funding winter of indefinite length. So, you know, they should capitalize on that. And conversely, investors, whether they are angels or institutions like Orias, who are participating in well-capitalized companies, you know, of course, it's troubled times for everyone, but they'll get through it. They'll get to the other side. The real challenge is for the other ventures who are looking for funding, and that's worth a deeper conversation. Mehraj, you've gone on mute.
Thanks, Jaideep. We'll talk about how people should prepare if they're looking for funding and what's hot despite COVID. But Vineet, what's your first observation from this situation now? Who should be more worried about, or you should just wait and watch before you can really conclude? We are still at the edge of it.
So, again, if you're talking about specifically startups, right? The question here is who should be looking and who should be doing. Hey, can you guys hear me? My internet went down for a second. So, Mehraj, your question was, can you just repeat your question, please?
So, no, we're generally talking about, how, in the startup world, who should be more worried. There are various stakeholders in each situation. Someone just invested, someone who was committing an investment or was committed in investment by an investor. So things like that. How should you really begin to list down things and evaluate one's crisis?
Yeah. So, who should be worried is, in fact, in this case, all startups are equally lucky or equally, in a tough spot. Everyone should be worried because you may be one of those few startups that has money in the bank, but does that mean that your customers have money in the bank? Does that mean that your vendors have that, same money in the bank, right? So that becomes a concern. It is an economy-wide question. And sorry that, my first answer has gotten into such a deep and sort of a serious note, but it is what it is. In fact, we spent the first 2 weeks, multiple meetings, multiple hours with all of the startups that we had invested in. Literally, chalo, Excel sheet open karo. Let's go through it and let's figure out, where your cash position is, what is your burn rate, what is your runway, and what are the things you can do to extend your survival, but whatever the number, right? If today you think you have money for next 12 months, fine, then let's discuss how to make it 18. If you're saying you only have money for 5 months, fine, it is tough, but let's make that 5 into 7 or 8, right? Whatever that number is. Right now, those few unfortunate startups that had maybe 2-3 months of runway and they thought we are going to start fundraising in July or August, they are in a particularly deep spot. Just bad timing, and like everything else, luck plays a factor in the success. Sometimes luck plays a factor in putting you in a troublesome spot. So that would be my take on this.
Right. So I think everyone will have to reorient themselves. And Jaideep, what should be the start point for a vulnerable startup in terms of preparing for the days after the lockdown? Because it's not just that when lockdown is over, everything's going to be normal.
Yeah, see, there are, and I'll talk as an operating manager as well now. There are two dimensions to it, right? We're going to be going back to work. There's going to be a readjustment process. Everyone's going to be adjusting to a new reality. I went to office once in the middle, as a media company, just like yourselves, we're allowed to operate, but we've shut our office down. And it felt very strange to just be out of the house and, see the whole city empty. So there's a reorientation which is going to happen. We've been planning to reopen our office, and there's a million details which pop out. So 70% of my people come in our Delhi office on the metro, and the metro is not opening. There's a whole bunch of people who live in Noida have to come to Delhi to our office. The Noida police have decided that they're going to question everyone, and quite rightly so. I'm not judging them. Yeah. But these are operating issues which every entrepreneur will have to think about, every office has to think about. So the first thing I will say is that just because the lockdown is lifting doesn't mean that everything's going to go back to normal. It doesn't even mean that you need to open your office. Indeed, if things are going okay, I would advise people to just stay safe and keep working from home to the extent that they can. The fact that they can leave home and go have a drink in a bar means you can relax yourself anyway, right? So that's one part. So there's a short-term piece, like ultra short-term piece, first week of May, which is about coming back to work. And what we are seeing in our research, in our edge practice, is that entrepreneurs and CEOs are looking at the next 6 to 9 months, probably in 2 chapters. So there's the first chapter, which is, I think Vineet's already very lucidly explained around the sort of crisis management piece, and really taking a microscope to every cost, cash flows, this, that. But there is a second chapter that I have perceived talking to business leaders, which is that people have faith that India is going to bounce back, and indeed that the world is going to bounce back. Whether it be in Q3, Q4 this year or Q1 next year is anyone's guess. So people are also very conscious, and my advice to entrepreneurs would also be to be very conscious that they don't cut so far back that when the economy starts to come back again, they're not able to take advantage of those situations. And we're certainly taking that view. Okay. So those are the 2 or 3 things, immediate term, short term, and then medium term. Long term, who knows? Until a vaccine is discovered or developed for this terrible virus, who knows when we'll actually become so-called normal again, or what normal even means. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. We don't know what is going to be normal. And we need to actually, if you were to come down to those few thumb rules, where should one start with? And, I wouldn't want to beat around the bush, and would rather ask you 2-3 mantras or 2-3 action items that you would suggest startup founders or entrepreneurs in this season to, that they should actually start implementing. They should address people issue, revenue issue, or structure or processes. What should be they just doing next morning?
Mehraj, what should they not be doing is the point. But yes, I do understand, the authenticity behind this question. A lot of founders. One thing I'll say is, today we are already technically 31st day of our lockdown or 32nd day of our lockdown, right? So if by now some startups or any startups, anyone in the audience have not already gone line by line through every expense item that is recurring, right? For the last 6 months, right? Take an average. Last 6 months, what is the items that have been an expense every month, right? You have salaries, you have rental, maybe you have your AWS, web hosting charges, right? Simple things, your cell phone bills for your employees, your landline bill, your broadband connection bill, right? Everything is on the table in terms of cost cutting. Right now, one of the startups that we had invested in, I'll not be able to name them. He said, "What does everything mean?" I said, you've just taken on a new agreement, a rental agreement last year, right, in October or November with your landlord. Please go to him and say if next 3 months he will be okay with not taking rent. Right? That is also on the table. Go to your employees, be able to have that conversation. And so again, I'm repeating a lot of what people have known. But if there are still people who have not done this, then, guys, you've got to do this right away. That's number one. Number two, you've got to understand that you can't save your way out of a recession or a downturn, right? Because the money is also got to come in from somewhere, which means you got to look at who your customers are. What are your revenue sources? And be very aware that 80%, depending on the industry, right? Some industries as high as 80% of your revenue will go away. If you're a travel startup, 100% of your revenue is gone away right now, and maybe 10-20% will come back, once lockdown ends, right? Some other startups may be a little bit lucky, medium industry, the revenue will tighten up because brands will stop spending a lot, but still, subscribe to your websites. So these are the two areas, right? One is on the revenues and one is on the cost, and second is more importantly on the revenues. And we have seen that, entrepreneurs are usually, especially the younger entrepreneurs, are a little hesitant in terms of asking for money, right? I find that very odd. I mean, for all this conversation about they are young blood and they are more aggressive, actually they are the most embarrassed to ask for paisa.
Yes.
Right? And this has been a big challenge to have this conversation. And I don't blame the younger entrepreneurs. I used to be that 23-year-old entrepreneur who used to feel embarrassed. Ki, paise ke liye 4 baar call kaise kare, right? I'm like, you got to do it because, what else, right? So I'm very patient with these founders, but I'm also very no nonsense. It's, don't give me excuses. Go out and ask for money, right?
That's a very interesting. I think you've given us a very important point to discuss further, because ask for it. I mean, what's your ask? It's first big line to evaluate and ask yourself. But Jaideep, what one should do along with this, as in, if I were to go ask for money for my startup, how good should I look? What should I do before I can really stand up and say, I deserve this money despite all this situation in economy?
See, I'll actually divert that question to Vineet, because I'm sure people are coming to him every day. But I will say something else. There is another source of funding people shouldn't forget. It's called revenues. Now, there are sectors, travel is a great example, where it's a very unfortunate time. There are many other sectors, and media, our business, Mehraj, is one of them, where we've had to pivot and create new capabilities very, very quickly to be able to survive, right? And for years and years and years, people have been talking about digital events, and it's never happened, right? And in 6 weeks, the whole world of events has gone digital. Exactly the same thing. I was listening to Professor Harari, the famous author, and he was saying the same thing about Hebrew University, where he teaches, and education. He said 20 years we've been talking about digital education, and it took 3 weeks and one virus, and the whole university has gone digital. So there is also the opportunity for many, many startups and well, all kinds of companies to look at a silver lining where they can actually create new capabilities very quickly. They will find customers and stakeholders absorbing those much faster than they would in so-called normal times, right? And incidentally, digital events have a much better EBITDA than physical events used to have, right? So the topic of our discussion, silver linings. This is a silver lining that I see, where while we are scrambling to cut costs and raise money and manage our cash flows, we should also be equally active in thinking about new ways of driving revenues. But I'll defer to Vineet in terms of how should a startup package themselves to actually raise money. He'll probably be able to answer that better.
Yes, absolutely. But I think thanks, Jaideep, for bringing us back to our topic that we are actually looking for, and we have to sort of discover silver lining in this situation. Vineet, Jaideep has rightfully diverted the question back to you on how one should package overall situation so that one can really go next morning and ask for more funding, etc.
Right, and absolutely well taken, Jaideep. If you are looking for VC funding before even having figured out what your customers are willing to fund you, right? It's called revenues and profits. That should be number one on the list. And while you're waiting for revenues, in the interim, you want an angel or a VC funding. That's absolutely correct, right? You should do that. What I would say is, depending on the industry, depending on the sectors, and we later on talk about which sectors are seeing headwinds versus which sector are seeing tailwinds. But depending on that, certain industries, I have actually seen some examples of startups, which had a on-field sort of sales force, right? Their salesmen had to go to the customer's office, sit outside the manager's office, do a demo, and try to, after 1 or 2 meetings, get a purchase order and, the standard B2B enterprise sales in India. And I have actually seen those people have switched over entirely to a telephone plus online checkout. I mean, this is a product which you and I would never think can ever be checked out on 5 lakh rupee order and you check out and pay 5 lakh rupees online. That's not what they've done. So all that they've done is you pay us a token amount. It could be 5%, 7%, even 10%, right? Whatever that amount is, right? आप उसको credit card पे डाल दो. We'll book your order, we'll confirm your order, we'll start the service. Because maybe the product service can be digitally delivered or it's some software that can be installed. We'll start the service and then we are trusting that once the lockdown opens up, we will still come to your office, we'll still do the purchase order, we'll still take a physical check for the remaining 95% amount. Right? So you've got to be extremely careful that you don't look at a solution and say, this will not work in my industry. Online payment to Amazon ke liye chalta hai, hamare liye thodi chalta hai. That's not a fair thing to say anymore. And like you said about this professor in Israel, right? I mean, we are seeing this across the board. I am here in Bangalore and the Karnataka government schools, and I know someone who works very closely with Sunil ji, who's the education minister, and they have moved to digital. I'm talking Karnataka government schools. I'm not even talking the private schools and the IB and CBSE and all of those, right? Karnataka government schools are moving to digital. So at that point, no one else in any other industry has an excuse. If a customer is still,
So अब हमें मानना होगा कि भाई ये नहीं चलता है, ये कहने से काम नहीं चलेगा. You have to change your mindset and adhere to new practices and reinvent yourself right from your selling strategies to your cost structure to revenues, your pitching, as in your fund pitches. But coming on to the people side of it, Jaideep, what's your sense from the industry, whichever way you look at it? Are we going to have a lot of layoffs in the startup universe? and there are a lot of unpredictable. Unpredictable is perhaps a simple word for it. What all we're going to see there?
Yeah, see here, I have on the face of it, what you might call a slightly right-wing mindset. I think that entrepreneurs and companies being forced to keep people on payrolls is not a good idea, unless the government can in turn give them some kind of a relief or compensation, so that there is the seesaw is balanced. We haven't seen that happen yet. I think everyone in the ecosystem needs to realize that if a company is groaning under the load of excessive labor cost, which is now completely disproportionate to the business volume. It may have been fit for purpose 3 months ago or 4 months ago, but it's not going to be fit for purpose for the next 6 to 9 months. They should be allowed to lay off people, because if someone's got 1,000 people employed and they're allowed to lay off 200, the way I look at it is you've just saved 800 jobs, right? Because if the whole damn company folds up because they've run out of cash or because they just simply can't afford that payroll, then you're going to have a much worse problem. So the unfortunate thing is we are stuck between a very hard decision and a terrible decision. There are no good scenarios here, unfortunately, especially in a country where social security is an alien concept. So one is very conscious of that. But I do feel that labor market flexibility is critical at such a time. Okay, so that's one part of the answer. A second part of the answer, completely, the opposite side. Every company, whether they're manufacturing, service, whatever, they have a core team, a few people who are essential to their success. Some of these folks will be in the leadership level, some will be on the front lines and so on. And it's critical for every entrepreneur, every CEO to work very closely with their CHRO and re-identify and reassess who those folks are and cotton wool them. Keep them in cotton wool. Yeah.
But I think that's going to be the toughest part of it. Like you said, hard decision and terrible decision. And then you actually go, when you decide, who do you really pick for this direction? We need tips on that.
So guys, you had asked me earlier, Mehraj, what does that 2x exit mean, right? The full sentence is 3x startup, 2x exit, right? So I've run 3 companies, of which 2 of them have exited, but that also means 1 of them did not exit, right? So then the question is, what happened in that one case? And today people have the excuse that Corona ke karan we have to let go people, right? But you have to understand, 2 years in, I had to lay off some people just to keep the startup afloat, right? We were in a very unique situation. An investor committed the amount, a part of the amount came in, and then the rest of the amount did not come in 6 months later, right? So we didn't have the money to run the full house. And the debate was very clear. And unfortunately, today it is even clearer, right? And I don't have to say beyond what Jaideep already said, that are you going to keep the 80% of the staff and run a business? Or are you going to keep the 100% of the staff and shut down the business? Right? So I am a very aggressive person when it comes to this, because the primary responsibility of a founder or a promoter is to the business. Right? We all want to be nice and publicly, be politically correct and say, no, har ek ko saath leke chalo, right? But, you don't have unlimited resources. You don't have unlimited bank balances. You don't have.
Right. So I think we have some good insights on, looking at high points, cost, revenue, people practice, how you reinvent your sales strategy. And then let's maybe come on the investment side. If one was to start, if one were to start a new business, which are the new attractive points, sectors? Like there's always a theme of the season. Vineet, can I start with you on that? And which sectors a fund manager or an investor like you or your friends would be looking at?
So At Orias, we are a early stage fund, and we are what, we at least like to consider ourselves very thesis driven, which means we think about it, we sit back, we think, and then we build a thesis, and then we follow that thesis, right? So all the hard work is done at the time of building the thesis. After that, it's actually easy because you're following a playbook. And we believe there are certain active sectors over the next 12 to 14 months that will see a lot of positive tailwind. And even going forward, these sectors will see benefits just because things are changing. And, like you said, right, colleges and schools will move to tech. We believe, number one, businesses that are online to online businesses, right? This includes gaming, this includes content, even this includes startups that will help you with, buying stocks or mutual fund, as long as it's completely online to online, which means you open the app or you open the website, the customer is acquired digitally through a Facebook ad or a Twitter ad. Then the customer visits the app or the website. The customer is then shown the product digitally, and the customer pays for it digitally and finally uses the service also digitally, right? So it's end-to-end digital, right? Both your businesses have opportunities, especially in the media business. Today it's digital end-to-end. Then we also have businesses where we believe there is an opportunity to acquire the customer online and only provide the delivery service offline, right? This starts everywhere from Swiggy and Dunzo all the way through a lot of other industries which are delivering. And today you're seeing that, right? Everywhere, grocery delivery, whatever other food delivery, medicine delivery is doing very well. So there is an offline component, but the customer is not part of the offline component. That will become very important, which is why, retail and malls and hospitality is going to suffer in the medium term, is because the customer needs to go offline to actually use the service in a restaurant or a pub. That's not going to work, right? So online to online, online to offline, where the customer doesn't need to be offline. Number three is healthcare. We think healthcare is the one unique area where even if there's an offline opportunity, it will still work, just because everyone is going to start upgrading their healthcare. And the way we see it is, all these years, how defense budget was very big. I'm hoping over the next 10 years, the healthcare budget will become very big and the governments will become large buyers of technology and healthcare technology, right? So a lot of the, and you're seeing this, it came in the papers a couple of days ago, government has said, right, defense procurement is going to be frozen. Now, those budgets are going to go somewhere. And that is hopefully our idea is going to go towards healthcare infrastructure upgrade, right? Tech-led. And then we also have education, of course. Almost anything in education, tech today is a demonetization moment for them. They're going to do wonderful for the next 12 months before things settle down. And lastly is SaaS. That is going to support the above sectors that I have mentioned. So SaaS for online to online, SaaS for online to offline, SaaS for healthcare, SaaS for edtech. Right?
Absolutely. Very clear. I think that's very interesting. And thank you for, listing those frankly and speaking your mind here, Vineet. Jaideep, any choices with sectors vis-a-vis startup investment?
Yeah, I have a slightly different take on it. My advice to any entrepreneur is always do what you're passionate about. And even if that happens to be something which is not fashionable from an investment perspective at the moment, you can be sure it will become fashionable if your business is a sound business, right? Some of the things that Vineet just spoke about, 3-4 years ago, no one would be bothered with them. SaaS companies used to have a really hard time in 2016, 17, and then suddenly they caught fire. Conversely, you could be setting up a B2C company to sell grass online and people would be there to fund you. And now even a high quality B2C e-commerce company can't find funding. So there's an element of waves here which happens. And then there is the themes which Vineet so kindly put out, which are also very important. But I think, when I'm looking to make personal investments and I make a few, the first thing I look for is how passionate is the entrepreneur about what they're doing. Do they live and eat and breathe it every single day? And of course, does the business make fundamental sense? Simple stuff, you need to be earning more than you're spending and common sense like that, which I call class 11 accountancy. So with that qualifier, I think any business is a good business. Now, I also want to just address as a question from one of the attendees, Mr. Anupam, Saronwala. Hi, Anupam. So the funding going forward, actually, we've put out a research report just today. The Eco Times has just carried a press release, so you can see that it's a VCC Edge press release. We've already found in March that funding has gone down by 60 percentage points by value and 80 percentage points by volume. And so April, May, June is a proper funding winter. And there is another couple of questions which touch upon these. So I just want to just caution anyone who's looking to raise funding. This is a bleak time, unfortunately, to raise funding. There's unfortunately just no silver lining here at the moment. I would advise you, if you're in really early stage, to do friends and family, do convertible rounds, to just get through the next sort of 3 to 6 months. Don't look for a proper Series A unless you really have to. And those of you who really have to, be ready to have really tough conversations and expect haircuts on your valuation expectations. Okay. Beyond that, I won't say anything because every single funding case is a different one.
Absolutely.
No, and if I may,
Yes,
over
please.
here, Jaideep has just spiced up this entire conversation. So, Jaideep, I agree. I agree. No, I'm happy, and I think the audience would appreciate this as well, right? I mean, unless we are not at each other's throats, that's how Arnab is Arnab, na? So, while I agree with you that entrepreneurs should, obviously go after what is their passion, that doesn't change. I've had 3 different startups, so levels to passion and ideas of passion, right? I've had 3 startups, and if I tell you the areas that they were in, you'll be like, who the hell is passionate about that, right? One was selling software to trucking companies, right? I mean, I never woke up and said, yaar, main jab bada hounga to trucking company ke liye software bechunga, right? It was not passion. But the passion was that I wanted to have a software tech kind of business. And it so happened that was the space I then identified, right? So it doesn't mean that, you sort of box yourself into that limited space and use that as an excuse not to look outside.
Sure.
Right? And this is something that's very important. My third startup was selling construction material online, right? Again, where is the passion in that? Yeah, I mean, I don't even come from a family of builders, right? So I'd never done it before, right? So I would suggest that yes, passion is critical, but there is an opportunity not to limit yourself because you have identified a passion, and that passion still needs to be a little loosely held. So yes, if someone has a passion about the travel and hospitality industry, right? I'm not saying drop it and go do healthcare software tomorrow, right? I'm not debating that. However, also be realistic on what can travel do, what within travel works for you, right?
I think that's very tough, but very important point you made, Vineet. Because if you got the passion and the know-how, it's not that you cannot do this business, but you have to perhaps reevaluate your plans. In fact, begin to get these questions also. I would rather sum up all of them as of now. Many of them saying, "What happens to my dream startup?" kind of question. It's like I had I had my uncle telling me he would fund it, or I thought I was planning things like that. कि 2 महीने बाद मैं शुरू करूंगा. Next year I wanted to do it. What happens to those thoughts? Can we just shut them up and move on, or we can sort of keep working on startup ideas? Vineet, you want to start with?
Sure. I feel that, everyone's plans have gotten a reevaluation, right? Even someone who's been running a startup for 5 years, or someone who's been running a startup for 12 months, or someone who is, still getting their private limited company registered, right? So irrespective of how young or how old you are in the startup, and you have over here Jaideep, you have over here Mehraj, you've run businesses that are a lot more mature than any startup is, right? You need to be able to reevaluate who your customer is, how will you market to your customer, who is actually paying for your product, how much will they pay for your product, and how large is the market in the post-lockdown era. right? If after that also the answers satisfy you, then sure, absolutely go ahead and do it, right? That is the best case scenario. If before lockdown and after lockdown, there's only a 10% difference, that's just superb.
Right?
But
I just say
you have to sit and do that exercise.
Yes,
I
Jaideep.
I just want to add, and I just want to add to what Vineet said. 100% agree with you, Vineet. And I also think, see, most startups today, in the context of this conversation, are building some kind of product or IP or platform. Okay, the next 6 to 9 months is a great time to actually invest your full energy and attention in actually building out your product or platform while practically no one's buying anything by and large, or markets are very, very slow. So conversely or paradoxically, I would say that if your business passes through the filters Vineet just said, then you should absolutely go in, be brave, and remember that the world always comes back. If we came back from 1918, we came back from 29, we came back from 45, we're going to come back again and we're going to start growing again. And one of the jokes I made, in my MBA group recently, I said, I don't care what else is happening in the world. I want to know what Warren Buffett's up to these days, right? Because in 2010 or 2009, we realized that in 2008, he bought out big chunks of everything that mattered, right? And he was sitting and smiling. And that's the view we should all take. And I can never forget what he says. He says, when everyone else is buying, you should be scared. And when everyone else is scared, you should be buying, or words to that effect. Similarly, when the markets are really slow, it's a good time to build and, be positive. Entrepreneurs have a different kind of pandemic. They have a pandemic of optimism, and we should never let go of that, albeit it should always be grounded in realism.
I'm expecting more questions onto this. In fact, we had Rahul Chatterjee introducing himself from Yededo. Rahul, please go ahead and type your question and we will try and address that. Meanwhile, like you talked about, cost cutting aspects, Jaideep, I think I left it there and maybe we can address that more. In more grown-up startups, so maybe let's say E-series or otherwise, if there are startups who have had a series of investments and now is the real question for them on how to sort of look at it further. What's the best idea for them right now to work out on in terms of cost and structure?
You mean more mature sort of startups?
So yeah, so I'm saying that startups who were on the stepping stone of being scaling up their operations and their funding is based on their scaling up abilities.
See, while the numbers might look bigger relative to a Series A startup in terms of what the P&L looks like, fundamentally the P&L doesn't change, right? And if they're looking to go and raise funding, so I'm not exactly sure what the context is, but if they're looking to go and raise funding, I think between Vineet and myself, we've already put forth what are the things that they should be thinking about in terms of digital pivots, in terms of do the market still hold good 6 months down the line, in terms of post recovery, let me say post-COVID. I don't know if there'll ever be a post-COVID, but post-crisis, let's say, right? Is there going to be some degree of growth coming back to the markets? If all of those boxes are ticked, then what they should do, in my view, is take out costs wherever they can, extend that runway. Again, Vineet had spoken about this, and push out the need to go and raise funding to the extent possible. Okay, there's going to be people at all ends of the spectrum here. There'll be those who won't survive 3 months without funding, and there'll be those who are looking to raise growth capital but can actually trundle along just fine for the next 6 to 9 months without raising funding and cutting back some capex and so on. So if you have the luxury of being one of those, then for God's sake, cut back the capex and just preserve the money, because right now it's a buyer's market, and the investors are going to take you to the cleaners from a valuation perspective, as they should. When the markets are hot, you guys take them to the cleaners, right? So it goes both ways.
Jaideep, just to add, right? Yes, and I've spoken to multiple VCs, and the idea here is very clear, right? Next 60 to 90 days, a lot of people will have conversations, right? And these are genuine conversations. You should have these conversations. In fact, it's great. If I was an entrepreneur, I would always have those conversations because it's about relationship building, right? And you don't know tomorrow where that relationship may take you. I mean, just today, it so happened, a startup that we met in February, right? We decided not to invest, but today I created a WhatsApp group and, introduced him to another VC at one of the much larger funds, right? I mean, you could easily call it top 2 in India, right? So that is the power of that founder's ability to build a relationship. Even a VC who did not invest in him was giving an introduction. And I am the prime example. Today I work at Orias, and you people may ask me how I even got the job. Rehan and Orias actually had declined investing in my building material startup.
Right? He wanted you for himself, so he didn't want to fund your startup.
No, this is a long time. This was 2015.
Question. Gaurav Agarwal is asking a question. He's saying, since the investors are not keen on funding, maybe they may not be keen on funding in this scenario. Will they switch to mentoring, or rather they consider mentoring opportunity on pro bono basis? This is a question from Gaurav Agarwal. Vineet, you want to start on that?
Sure. Great question, Gaurav. The problem with investors turning to mentors is, number one, very rarely, right, do investors have deep knowledge about your industry. Okay, very rarely. And if you want a mentor, you actually want a mentor who's got deep knowledge from your industry, right? When I was running my startup, my mentor was the president of Tally Software. He knew software inside out. I mean, if you're the president of Tally Software in India, aapko pata hai India mein software kaise bechte hai. You most probably invented how to sell software in India, right? So that is the mentor you always want, someone who comes from the industry. That is number one. Number two, investors sometimes have to shy away from mentoring, especially when they have not invested, because even in the startups we've invested, we don't want to mentor, right? We are pure financial operators. We don't want to become business operators even as mentoring, because it is the entrepreneur's job, and it becomes a little bit of a sticky wicket for an investor to give mentoring. And tomorrow, God forbid, by definition, right, nothing happens or something negative happens. Most investors don't want to mentor for that reason. Definitely outside of their own portfolio, they don't want to. It's just a liability. These are the two things, right? You want a mentor with experience in your industry, and investors shy away from mentoring because there could be a potential for liability or criticism down the line. It's very sad. It is true. I came here promising to tell you the way it is, and that's what I'm doing.
Jaideep, what all precautions one should take in that case? I mean, mentoring is definitely a trend in the industry, and it has always been like-minded people. Like Vineet just mentioned, he had someone in mind who he connected one entrepreneur with.
Yeah,
it's not going to stop, right?
That's so. Helping entrepreneurs is something that all investors would do. Frankly, all professionals should do. Why not, right? And connecting people, this and that, I think is par for the course. I actually violently agree with Vineet on his entire narrative on mentoring. And I would actually take one step further. I would actually advise anyone to have mentors who know them personally to some extent. The more they know them, the better it is, right? Because how you take decisions, how you look at the world, etc., is really important because look, forget any investor, anybody who's mentoring you has only a limited amount of time. So they will end up giving you, what I call global gyan. But someone who actually knows you and understands how you think and your perspective on the world will be able to add that much more value to you.
But do you really mean that it has to be a very formal arrangement then? I mean,
not necessarily formal. Yeah, I think it has to be more, what am I looking for? More intimate rather than formal. Right, where there is a personal connect that is created between the mentor and the mentee, right? Again, other people may have different views on this. I don't think there's one universal truth when it comes to mentoring, but here I think Vineet and I have exactly the same thoughts here. I don't have this whole liability challenge, but that clearly is also an issue on the table here.
No, actually, but since we're talking, my concern is if one is mentoring someone else, how much invested is he in? Is it just, sort of being courteous, or actually you are invested in when you are mentoring someone, and then that makes it formal? So then it
See,
really has accountability.
so for me personally, I have stuck to mentoring. I mean, I don't even use the term mentoring. I very frankly, I've stuck to working with or engaging with entrepreneurs who I have found good enough to invest in. The odd time a friend will call and take advice, to me that's not mentoring. I do the same with my friends, right? But I I have scarce free time, and that scarce free time to me is best invested in working with those people who I know the best. And clearly, if I have taken the trouble of evaluating someone and cut a check for them, then it's just natural that if they turn to you and ask you 3 questions, you kind of try and answer them. Um, Personally, and again, this is a very, very personal thing, I don't really mentor people in that structured kind of way. Other people do, and they do it very, very well. And I guess it's everyone has their own different kind of take on this. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll quickly move to Vaibhav Solanki's question. Vaibhav from Binary Sphere is asked a very interesting question. He's saying they don't have marketing and sales team. If the product is good enough, would an investor still be interested in investing and help create a marketing and sales team? So I think he's asking 2 questions. One is, can we do without a marketing and sales team?
Can I take this one? I'm deeply
please.
As someone who grew up as a sales professional, guys, look, many entrepreneurs are great engineers, great creators of products, and have this hugely mistaken belief that if my product is a Rolls Royce, people will walk in and they'll be banging my door down to take the product. I always tell them, even Rolls Royce has dealers. Even Rolls Royce needs to appoint dealers in New Delhi and in London and others, right? You cannot build a business without a sales organization, full stop. Whether an investor can help you do that or not, I'll defer to Vineet, but don't move forward in building your business under a mistaken assumption that you can somehow scale it and make it attractive for VCs and Series B and Series C investors without a really strong sales and marketing function. Then it doesn't exist. That condition doesn't exist.
Jaideep, if I may add, right? Like you said, you're from a sales background, and most entrepreneurs are people like me, right? Computer science nerds. And you're absolutely right. And maybe I should repeat what you said just so they hear it from someone like them who can talk to them about assembly language and Python and Pascal and C++, right? That guys, unless you as a technical founder are willing to drop all your techs and go and be your own top sales guy and your top marketing guy, sales and marketing is absolutely mission critical to running a business, right? Whatever that business is. Even Google has sales and marketing people. Let's be very fair. Okay. And I just wanted to say what you said so they understand that even a non-sales person is saying.
No, but let me quickly address the second part of Vaibhav's question is that will an investor help setting up a team for sales and marketing?
Fair question. Now, because we are an early stage fund, it very often so does happen that, we may be investing only when it is just the 2 founders or 3 founders, right? So in that case, one of the founders is putting in a pseudo relationship of being head of marketing till they actually get a full-time head of marketing or sales. That's perfectly fine. Investors do help.
Cool. I'm going to take 2 questions at a time. Sudhakaran Nair's question on is organic farm production a good idea right now? In my words, quickly. And another question for Vineet from Ramakrishna about building, locating that question. Yeah, can please share some suggestions for a person who is looking at selling building materials online, especially Mr. Vineet. So one on organic farm production, another on building materials.
Jaideep, go ahead, take one, I'll take one.
What I know about organic farm production, you could write on the back of an envelope. In fact, a postage stamp and still have space left over it. So I'll end up misleading the entrepreneur. I genuinely, I love eating organic fruit. So to that extent, you have a consumer. Is it a viable business in India? I have absolutely no idea. So I'll defer if I may.
You're right. I mean, I look at the agri-tech sector as well, and unfortunately, organic produce in India is a premium, super premium category product. It's like organic milk. And having said that, we invested in Country Delight, which actually does not do organic milk, because 90% of Indian middle class doesn't want to buy organic because the premium is too high, right? Everyone wants it, but no one's willing to pay a 35 to 100% premium for organic. And I don't think Corona has changed that about our value consciousness. So that's my answer on that.
Quickly, I'm looking for more questions.
Oh, he asked about the selling building materials online.
Yes,
Again,
please.
Look at the market size. Currently, the market is going to be extremely subdued. Construction is going to be slow because the migrant labor is not going to come back very fast. There's excess inventory in a lot of markets. So be very, very careful. Do your market study. I am happy I am not in the construction material space right now.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we are moving towards.
I think there's one other question, which is
Yes.
around, does it make sense to get an NDA signed if you have a unique differentiating process, etc.?
Right.
My personal experience is don't bother. VCs and angels are not in the business of IP theft by and large. And as far as I know, most funds will refuse to sign anyway. But I don't know, Vineet, if you guys agree to sign.
You've given the answer I would have given. I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah. Okay.
So differentiation as a theme in a crisis where economy is not doing that great, how differentiated could you be? Is differentiation a very good idea, or you are likely to get lost in terms of losing out from mainstream and So any thoughts on that?
Because differentiation is always a good idea. Differentiation of your value proposition is not a function of whether the markets are hot or cold. It's a question of how well your differentiated value proposition serves the needs of your customers as they are today, and as you can imagine them evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, right? So to my mind, it would be a mistake for any entrepreneur to connect the state of economy or state of markets with the notion of differentiating their products. The flavors of differentiation might change, and the way you position your your product or service might change given market conditions and market moods. But as a fundamental thought process, it should be pervasive. Innovation leading to differentiation should be a DNA thing here.
I think
I mean, this is a basic question anyway.
Specify 3 big silver lining statements if you want to make any. Vinay, 2 or 3 silver lining statement, because we started with the theme that Brave New World and the silver lining in startup world.
Basically, you're telling me make 3 statements. Jo 2 mahine baad you can catch me and say तीनों के तीनों गलत थे. That's basically what you want.
Now I can rephrase it for the sake of this conversation. Give us some hope.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, give us some hope. All of us are looking for.
So here's the thing, right? And I'm lucky we already have Warren Buffett's name used over here. I am an entrepreneur. You're all both of you are in positions of fairly entrepreneurial strength, right? You have to chart the course of your own business. The hope here is that we will survive and we will continue to grow. It is a momentary break. The car has not crashed, nor has it stopped, nor has it run out of fuel. Only matters how long is the red light for. It may be longer than what was earlier, but we have survived and thrived, and we will continue to grow as a species, as a nation, and as an economy. So if there are opportunities that you find, and in fact, today there are more opportunities for young entrepreneurs, because what we are seeing very clearly is till 6 months or even 2 months or even 1.5 months ago, a huge chunk of our economy was run, or huge chunk of our buying was done by the largest businesses through other largest businesses. And today you have to understand they are in an even deeper hole than the startups, because they have got thousands of crores of infrastructure already invested. They are the ones who have got 20,000 and 10,000 and 5,000 employees to think about. Startups are the ones which are going to be the most benefited if only they are willing to survive the next 6 months. I've written about this also. Just survive the next 6 months, whatever the cost, because what will happen is there'll be 2 people on the left of you and 2 competitors on the right of you who will not survive. And by definition of you having survived, there's going to be a lot more business for you. Just survive. That's it. It matters so much. It's not funny.
Fantastic. Jaideep, any 2-3 big statements of hope?
Yeah, see, honestly, these are statements I would have made to you 6 months ago also. Number one, I personally like businesses which are globally scalable. Okay. So SaaS is a great example of that. A fantastic globally scalable businesses coming out of India. The most amazing examples, of course, are Zoho and now Freshdesk, or Freshworks as they call them. But behind them, there's a whole bunch of fantastic startups. I've been very lucky to be invested in 2-3 of those. The second thing, from an India perspective, the one thing which doesn't change in this country, COVID, drought, flood, anything, is a broken supply chain, right? So any business, any entrepreneur who is able to solve supply chain type problems, right from last mile delivery to factories to highway, whatever it might be, there is huge opportunities there. And I think over the next few months, we're going to see dramatic changes in the supply chains with social distancing and all of this stuff becoming the new normal. And entrepreneurs should take advantage of that, right? The third thing I would say is that practically every business, even manufacturing businesses, can be asset-light businesses today, right? There's plenty of manufacturing capacity in this world for all kinds of interesting things. So it doesn't matter how much capital you've raised or are looking to raise, you should always be thinking asset-light, variable cost models with shock absorbers built in. And I would have said exactly these things to you 6 months ago, right? Now, given where we are today, civilizationally, there are some obvious businesses you want to steer away from. Anything which involves brick and mortar, shopping malls, hotels, etc. You better have a really, really exceptional story of some sort. If you're going to be going into those sectors and segments, we don't have to repeat those. I think, anyone reading the newspapers will know which are those sectors to steer clear of for the next few months. But if you're already there, go into survival mode, all right? And wait for the storm to pass.
Right. So I think some of these, tips or helping advice, I think I'm quite hopeful now, and I have good insights. If I were to be running a startup, I think I have a lot of thoughts to take home today from this conversation.
This is philosophically a very important question to answer. So Chirag Sankeshwari has said, in hospitals, they don't have sales teams. So,
yes.
So I just want to remind them that they may not have sales teams in the sense that they don't have people making sales calls asking if you're sick, but they spend crores and crores on advertising, right? And their sales teams actually are their doctors. So it may not be an in-your-face telephone selling or door-to-door selling process, but you can be rest assured that in the boardrooms of the healthcare companies and hospital companies, they're thinking about the sales function as well. And it goes back to the ubiquity of needing an effective sales and marketing function to run practically any business.
Absolutely. I think each industry has its own way of running a sales team. So orient yourself, reevaluate your pitch. And I think one of these best statements or lines that came out and that I must remember is that if you think you are in a hole, there are bigger businesses who are in bigger holes. So, if you could survive for 6 months, that's it. That was Vineet's advice. And I think Jaideep summed it up very well by saying that, you have to sort of get up again all over and differentiate. And all those advices are going to be very useful. Jaideep Mehta, Vineet Bhansali, thank you so much for joining us.